Thank you for joining us on the Nikki Medoro Show. I am so excited. And I use the word excited liberally here because we're going to be talking about one of our favorite topics, but something that gets us very, very upset, which of course is PG&E. We have Loretta Lynch back on the show in just a moment, and she is our expert and our go-to because we know our rates are going up. We know that the fires are going to come again. We also know that PG&E isn't doing enough. So what can we do and what is the latest we will get into? Now, before we get to Loretta, please, you guys, click the thumbs up button. Show your support for the show. Our super chat is live, whether you're watching this live or it's recorded. So just click the $ under the chat box, and we appreciate every donation you can give us. But the number one way to support the show, of course, is to become a Medorable, an official Patreon subscriber, monthly Patreon subscriber, whatever you can afford. And we know with our PG&E bills and Christmas here that times are tough. But if you can support the show in this way, we do appreciate it. Just go to thenikkimedoroshow.com. thenikkimedoroshow.com. Our Patreon link is there. Our PayPal link. Just go to paypal.com and put in the email address, thenikkimedoroshow@gmail.com. Our merch shop is there, my list of favorite things. All of these links, like I say every show, are in the show notes, and we appreciate you oh so very much. So let's get into it and welcome one of the former heads of the California Public Utilities Commission and now an advocate for all of us against what PG&E is doing, Loretta Lynch. Loretta, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Nikki. And just so you know, I was an advocate for consumers when I was on the commission, too.
There you go.
It was a hard row to hoe because most of those commissioners are pretty co-opted.
And I love that you said that because I feel like that is the crux of the problem, right? That we constantly talk about is this question of how can PG&E do X? Isn't there anybody watching out for us? And it's supposed to be the CPUC. Bring people up to speed a little bit, though, on the latest news, of course. Last week on the show, we had Mark Toney with Turn On talking about these rate increases that are coming. And Turn is proposing caps on how much PG&E can raise our rates. So what is your thinking behind this? Is this just just going to have to accept that this is life living in California and PG&E can do whatever it wants to?
Well, no, because we have elected representatives that we can complain to and that we can hold accountable, because that's really what this is all about. The PG&E and the other states' utilities have realized it's a whole lot easier to co-opt 3 of the 5 folks on the PUC than to actually do their job and reduce wildfires, increase safety, increase reliability at reasonable prices. So every dollar that they spend is a dollar we give them. And every penny of profit is a penny of profit we give them. And we, being the PUC, allows them to take it from us. And let's just set a context here. PG&E's rate increases have been and continue to be outrageous. From 2020 to September of 2023, PG&E's rates increased 51%. 51%. When the consumer price index only increased 16%. So we are outstripping actual inflation and other price increases by more than 3 times. That's egregious, it's unnecessary, and it's unsubstantiated. And we have no place farther to look than the PUC itself.
Right.
A very courageous administrative law judge just recently said no to PG&E because, as you know, from 2020 to 2023, the rates increased 51%. But that they weren't done because they had another rate increase ready to go.
Yes.
First. And the PUC's administrative law judge said no. You know, PG&E has not made its case. It should not be thrown a bunch of our money to do a bunch of way too expensive things that actually aren't going to make us safer. So the administrative law judge rejected a big chunk of PG&E's request and said, no, you can only underground, which is just extraordinarily expensive and often unnecessary. You can only underground 200 miles of your 10,000 mile system. So what happened? Cruise, autonomous vehicle company that has now no longer operated because it ran over a lady.
Right.
Cruise's former general counsel, who's now on the PUC, wrote a different decision than the ALJ and said, oh no, let's give them pretty much everything they want. So they did. So on top of the 51% rate increase through September of 2023, we're going to have another almost 13% rate increase that hits on January 1st. So that's another $30 to $35 a month for most people. But what's really egregious here is the PUC has allowed PG&E to profiteer off of poor people.
Mm-hmm.
So our CARE program, which is for people who make essentially $60,000 and less, or families $75,000 or less, you can get a discount on your utility bill. That discount is shrinking into a tiny nothingness because from 2020 to 2023, CARE customers' rates went up 67%, 4 times the rate of inflation and price increases. And so CARE people who can afford at least are being squeezed even more, if you can imagine, than the rest of us. But PG&E is now going to, for 2020 to 2023 entirely, have a rate increase of almost 64%.
That's crazy.
Totally. But that's not enough, because you think at some point that, the greedy little buggers would stop. But no, on December 1st, PG&E filed for another rate increase. They'd like an interim rate increase of another almost $2 billion. And they want that interim rate increase to be imposed as of March. And we're just getting a almost 13% increase January 1st, but they'd like some more, please. And so what they've said is we need another almost $2 billion, $1.86 billion in March before we prove that we need it. So just give it to us in advance, which is very pernicious if the PUC says yes to this, because it will be one of the first times the PUC lets them take our money without even looking at the facts. So in some sense, okay, the PUC is giving it up to them no matter what, generally. Right. Maybe it's just more honest to say we don't even need to look at the facts. They just get whatever they ask for. So they're kind of ripping the Band-Aid of pretense off of their job and saying, yeah, we'll just throw money at them. We'll throw your money at them. We'll give them your money as much as they want. But what that really means is people are hurting and our economy's hurting. And as bad as it is, which is just extraordinary for people, for California families, it's even worse for California small businesses, because California small businesses have the top 2 highest rates in the nation because of our PUC and its failure to rein in utility costs. That's what we're looking at.
I'm speechless a little bit, Loretta, when you so eloquently laid it out, the frightening horror that is to come for PG&E customers who have no other option. I think that's not every time I talk about PG&E and our electricity rates, I know that solar is an option, but not for everybody. There is normally, if there's a customer and they're ripping people off, and they're charging astronomical fees for something, we, the consumer, have a choice to take our business elsewhere, but we don't. Why? And I know every time I ask you the same question, and I know that you started off by saying you're elected officials, but why are our elected officials not doing anything?
Because they can shunt it off to this regulatory agency that is severely compromised. And so they do, because PG&E is a big political player and a big campaign player as well. As are all the private utilities. Why? Because they take our money from which they're profiteering and give it away in campaign contributions and charitable contributions and all sorts of contributions, and then come back to the PUC and say, we need some more, please. It's just absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, similar to the NRA, do you think, Loretta, that there could be some shame involved in taking money from PG&E, from these elected officials, that we, the voters, we, the Californians, should be looking into the background of some of these elected representatives that are supposed to represent us and be like, why are you taking so many donations from PG&E while this company is robbing us blind with all of these rate increases?
Absolutely. We should totally make it shameful to take money from the private utilities, political money from the private utilities, just like it is shameful for California Democrats to take money from tobacco companies or gun manufacturers. They won't take that money anymore because we, the people, have made it too politically precarious for them to take it. So let's add PG&E and all the other private utilities to that list of shame on you for taking their money and not doing your job to make sure the PUC reins in their costs. And it's not just me saying that. The state auditor in August issued a scathing audit saying the PUC is not doing its job. And also the consumer group within the PUC called the public advocates are not doing their job to actually take a hard look at utility costs and cut them. So the auditor said that at the beginning of 2023, now remember, we already had one rate increase this year and we're going to have another one. California had the 7th highest average electricity rates across the state. Now PG&E's rates are higher than those in Southern California. And also in just 1 year, just in 2022, California electricity rates rose between 16 and 23%. We cannot, as families and businesses and our economy, withstand this profligate spending and the PUC's failure to do its job. So the auditor has a roadmap for our elected officials and for our governor. And what's extraordinary is the PUC, in response to this audit, said, essentially, there's nothing we can do. The PUC said that it cannot implement the state auditor's recommendations to take a hard look at costs. Yes, they can.
Why? Why would they say that?
Well, and the auditor called it out as remarkable that the PUC itself says that they can't do their job, when in fact, the PUC has broad statutory authority to develop rules, all the rules that govern how the utilities apply for costs, how they prove their costs, and to compel the utilities to provide all information necessary to justify those costs, which the auditor said the PUC is not doing. So ultimately, we need to hit the PUC where it hurts, and this legislature needs to say no to the PUC's budget. Just no, you don't get a budget to regulate because you're not regulating. So therefore, we're not going to pay you to not do your job anymore. We're going to hold up your budget until you do your job. That's what the legislature needs to do.
Is there anybody that you know of that's doing that?
No.
Why?
But we're also not collectively asking people to do it, right? We need to collectively say, hey, you got to stop this. You got to make the PUC do their job and take a very sharp pencil to these profligate costs. I mean, for instance, it was very clear that PUC could have sided with the facts and the administrative law judge in this last extraordinary rate increase and just said no to a lot of PG&E's excessive costs. But instead, one of the 5 commissioners took the time and effort to write a whole new decision that gave PG&E substantially everything they wanted. They kind of cut $1 billion out of their almost $16 billion request and said, oh, look at us, we cut some. But what they didn't do is follow the facts and what PG&E had actually proved from that courageous ALJ that said, no, they didn't prove these costs as necessary, so no, we shouldn't give it to them. And that, that plus what they did in 2022, which was allow PG&E to keep excess profits. PG&E during the pandemic collected more profits than they were authorized to collect. And instead of returning promptly all the excess profits to the ratepayers, they asked the PUC, okay, can we keep those profits? And the PUC said yes. So the utilities overall in California got to keep almost $800 million in profits that they admitted were in excess of the very generous profits they were already authorized to collect. So as long as the PUC is going to say, oh yeah, no harm, no foul, we give you 10.25% of every dollar in profits. We give you 10 cents in profits, and you collected more than that. You collected 11 or 12 cents, and you don't have to give that back to the ratepayer. Well, then the PG&E and all the other utilities know it's open season. So ask for the stars and the moon and the sun, because maybe you won't get every single star, but you'll get the moon and the sun. It's just, this system is unsustainable.
Right.
64% in 3 years. Or, well, it'll be 4 years because of this rate increase that goes into effect in January. 64%. No other region in the country is paying that kind of an increase for, frankly, substandard and dangerous service.
And again, and I know we always call it Governor Newsom, but it's an abject failure on his part for someone that stands up and talks about price gouging oil companies and gas and all that stuff. This is a bill that we get every month that is, it's going to bankrupt people. You talked about the care program and the low income people. Even if you're on a fixed income, I mean, how are you supposed to be able to afford these kind of jumps? Here's my other question, Loretta. You know, when you're talking about the CPUC and the people, they get PG&E bills too, I'm assuming. Don't they get tired? Like, that's my thought. Don't they pay these higher rates too? Or do they have some free electricity they're getting just because they're on the CPUC?
They don't get free electricity, but some of them live in SMUD territory, and some of them live in LADWP territory. So as we know, government-owned utilities, which are called municipal utilities, have much lower rates and much better service, much better safety records, much better reliability records. And they don't propose these boondoggles of profiteering just to pad their profit bottom line. So this is why PG&E wants to underground 1,000 miles of their system. Because right now, those transmission lines that are hanging in the air are fully depreciated, meaning PG&E has wrung every penny of profit out of them they already could. And so they only get paid for the entirety of the cost of maintaining them and using them. But they don't get profit on those lines. But if they underground them, that's a new line, and it's a new source of profit. And their estimates for how much it costs to underground have gone up exponentially.
Of course.
Just 10 years ago, PG&E said it cost about $360,000 a mile to underground a line. Guess what their estimate is now?
How much?
Over $6 million a mile.
Oh my God.
How shameful is that they just cooked up
Some
a
number.
price increase, some number, and it is absolutely positively the fact that you can't go from $360,000 a mile 10 years ago to $6 million a mile now in a fact-based way. It's fantasy. It's their profiteering fantasy that they've put in front of the PUC, and then urge the PUC to give them the money before the PUC even looks at the numbers, because they know those numbers are not justifiable.
Yeah. It's crazy. I want to add this next thing into the conversation. And this has to do with the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. One of our listeners, Lee, wrote in this email, and it actually was a while ago, but it was after the last time we talked. She says, I think I'm reading this right, but it sounds like PG&E wants me to pay for their own employees. As a business, shouldn't they be responsible? And she sent me this picture of this notice that she received. A notice of PG&E company's request to increase rates for its DCPP, Diablo Canyon Power Plant, employee retention application. I am assuming, but give us the details, that this has to do with the fact that they want to keep the plant going now.
Well, the governor announced that he wanted to keep the plant going through 2030, so that when he runs for president, he won't have that pesky issue of the Diablo Canyon plant, because it'll already have been decided and we'll already be paying through the nose. But the point is, we've already paid for Diablo Canyon. We paid over and over for Diablo Canyon. It's been open since the mid-1980s, and we have fully paid for the cost of that plant. The problem is, for the last 3 to 4 years, PG&E has thought that they were going to close the plant, because at that point, under the standards that existed just 5 years ago, they couldn't prove to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that the plant was safe. And so they stopped investing in maintenance. And they told the workers, hey, this plant's closing in 2025. And they made a deal with consumers and environmentalists to close the plant because their license ran out in 2025. And the NRC had told them at the time, you can't get no new license because you're on an earthquake fault and there's a tsunami risk and you can't fix that. So they've basically been running this plant with chewing gum and baling wire for the last several years, which is why it breaks down more than almost any other plant in the country. It's offline because they haven't been maintaining it because they were going to shut it. So then last year, the governor says, oh yeah, let's not shut it because because our electricity markets are being gamed. And we know that there have been some times where we're on the ragged edge of shortage.
Right.
And he's been convinced that, oh, well, we need the plant. Instead of fixing the electricity markets, we're just going to throw money at this aging, frankly, unsafe plant. So the problem is you've got a lot of workers in that San Luis Obispo area who were told, hey, we're going to pay you a severance and then we're going to close the plant. So they're looking for other jobs, and some of them have gotten other jobs. So what the writer to the show wrote in about was, hey, PG&E wants to spend more money to give bonuses to those workers that they told, hey, we're going to essentially at some point give you a severance and lay you off, to give them a bonus to stay for the next 5 years.
So we have to pay for that.
Oh, of course. Understand, every single penny that PG&E spends comes from us. There's this myth of there is shareholder money. We pay for that shareholder money. It's just a bucket of the money we give. And the PUC calls that bucket shareholder money, and another bucket labor costs, and another bucket maintenance costs. Every single penny that PG&E gets and spends comes from us. You and me and California businesses pay for everything. It's a good gig if you can get it, because you also get 10% profit, as if you're taking a risk as a company, which they're not. So my concern about Diablo Canyon is frankly not, well, my concern is, one, PG&E has run the hell out of that plant for years without properly maintaining it. So we just paid top dollar for a broken down jalopy nuclear plant. That doesn't sound like a good gig. And we did pay top dollar because we're paying another $2 billion with a B to run that plant for 5 more years, $2 billion, I think, a year. When it hasn't cost $2 billion to run that plant each year. So PG&E basically held the governor up, by metaphorical gunpoint, and said, you want us to keep running this plant? You'll pay our price. And that's what happened. And the PUC rubber stamped that. And so we are paying through the nose for a broken down old jalopy plant that they haven't invested any maintenance in for a long, long time. That sits on an earthquake and has a tsunami risk that cannot be mitigated.
And I mean, obviously, if we're paying out the nose to run this plant for 5 years, I understand the need to address our electricity problems. Now, you're saying they gamed the system. We could fix our market, but they're choosing to go the Diablo way. Within the next 5 years, are we going to be able to fix the system that we're not going to keep the Diablo open even longer?
Well, that's the question, because basically California applied to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for an exemption to the current safety standards for the next 5 years. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has they haven't finally said it, but they've essentially said in preliminary decisions, okay, fine, but that's it. Well, 5 years ago, they said, okay, fine, it's it. You're not going to get a new license in 2025. But the governor prevailed upon the president and others to give us an exemption to safety standards that the NRC promulgated after Fukushima. Because PG&E for years was saying, we're fine because we're up on a cliff. If you've ever been down there, the nuclear power plant stands right on the ocean, but on a cliff.
Right.
And they're like, we'll never have a tsunami that's more than 20 feet high. Well, Fukushima proved that factually incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
And they can't move the plant. And so it's on an earthquake fault. So who knows what happens to that plant in an earthquake? Who knows what happens to all those radioactive rods that are in this cooling pool? Because if they hit each other in the cooling pool, if the cooling pool shakes, they'll spark. And don't even want to go there in terms of how dangerous that is. But there's no place to put that spent fuel so they have temporary on-site storage. Oh my God. So there's just so many safety issues that are involved with that plant that if people knew, they'd run. So regardless of whether you're for or against nuclear energy, that particular plant is not safe.
Right.
PG&E has not spent the necessary money to make it safe, and they cannot mitigate against the earthquake and tsunami risk that is inherent in where they place the plant. What are we doing? Rolling the dice that we're not going to have a major earthquake through 2030 that's going to really wipe out some serious part of California because of that plant and how unsafe it is at top dollar.
At top
So
dollar.
PG&E is going to make a ton more money off that plant, and we're going to pay. And frankly, because that's already the gig, I would rather pay to make it as safe as possible and have the trained workers there than try to train people from scratch at this point.
But it's not as if that notice that our viewer emailed to me. It's not like they're asking us. They're never asking us, right? It's just a notice that you're going to pay more because we need to pay the workers and give them their bonuses to keep this power plant open. Which I agree with you. I don't want it to be continually run with chewing gum and wire. I do want it run properly and safely. But again, like you've said, earthquakes, tsunamis, you can't mitigate against that. So we're just going to hold our breath for the next 5 years and then hope that they don't get another extension, right? Because they could
Well,
also get another extension.
and hope that the plant actually can run, because this plant is one of the worst performing nuclear power plants in the nation because of its maintenance issues and its age. And so we're paying top dollar supposedly for reliability, but when we needed it the most in 2020, it didn't run, or it ran at a very low level and not at its usual capacity. So one of the reasons for the blackouts in 2020 was because the PG&E Diablo Canyon Unit 1 was taken offline because of operational safety issues. So we're paying as if the money means power when it may not, because of the age and how rickety and how unmaintained the plant is. So we may be paying for nothing, and we may just be paying for an earthquake disaster. And we may be paying for power. And it's a shell game and a crapshoot about which one we're going to get for the next 5 years. Thank you very much. And do you trust the PUC to have actually looked at this before they rubber stamp the governor's proposal?
No,
I don't.
Nope. Do you think if we had another governor that this would be addressed? I mean, I do lay it at the feet of Governor Newsom. He's the governor. Very obviously close with PG&E and the CPUC, and this is happening under his watch. Do you think that when the time comes that Governor Newsom is no longer Governor Newsom, the next person is going to be able to do something about this?
Well, sadly, Governor Brown wasn't any better when it came to PG&E. Tied his ticks with PG&E, and Governor Schwarzenegger, the one thing he did do was back solar, but he was pretty tight with the utilities as well, and his commission was pretty tight with utilities. They did not allow such profligate rate increases or such profligate profit levels. Although I'm not a big fan of Schwarzenegger in many ways, but his PUC did take a pencil from time to time, although they also made some really stinky fossil fuel deals. So when you look at the history of our governors in the last 20 years, we do not have any shining examples of anyone who's protecting consumers or the environment or the health and safety of California.
Yeah.
But hope springs eternal, because it's going to be a very competitive race in 2026. And there too, that's where your listeners can make a difference, because that 2026 race will kick off at least by 2025. So in at least, in 13 months, we're off to the races for governor. And we should hold all candidates accountable for how they will approach the PUC and the utilities. And we should make that an integral part of who we vote for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's the number one issue facing Californians right now, as far as economically. This is a bill that is just astronomically going up. It's insane. And like you've been saying, we're not really any safer at this point.
No.
I mean, they have these plans to underground these lines. The ones that they choose aren't even in areas where they actually need them, as we've talked about before. And so let's talk a bit about, wildfire safety programs and the failures of PG&E to actually do something about it.
Well, and it's not just me. If you read the Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety in the Natural
I love to do
Resources,
that on my free time. I really love to do that, Loretta.
In the Natural Resources Agency, this June, they rejected PG&E's wildfire mitigation plan. It's called a WMP because they love acronyms. And according to law, the PG&E is supposed to submit a plan about how they're going to prevent and lessen wildfires every 3 years. And the legislature a couple of years ago took that review out of the PUC because they thought the PUC was so compliant and complicit, and was just rubber stamping PG&E's plans, and put it in a different agency, the Natural Resources Agency, and they created this new Office of Energy Infrastructure Safety. And that office in June rejected PG&E's proposed plan, saying it had critical deficiencies, and what PG&E was emphasizing as priorities would not make us safer, would not make us safer. And so they required PG&E to resubmit a plan according to all the critical deficiencies that they identified, which PG&E did. And now this office is taking comments on that plan. But the problem here is PG&E is acting as if this plan has already been approved, and they're going to the PUC, this new $2 billion request is as if their plan, which hasn't been approved yet, was approved, and please give us the money to implement a plan that has not yet been authorized, that was called out in the summer by the governor's Natural Resources Agency as critically deficient and not ensuring safety. PG&E, for instance, does not demonstrate how it will address its growing backlog of repairs. PG&E's undergrounding plan may leave wildfire risk unaddressed in the highest risk areas. PG&E does not provide even standards for most of its vegetation management, meaning tree trimming inspection programs, and PG&E does not adequately address critical risk from hazard trees. PG&E's decision-making process does not account for basically transmission circuits, which will lead to more power shutoffs than are needed. That is not me. I am reading from this rejection of their plan in the summer. And that is, let's just say, already tempered bureaucratic speak. So we know that PG&E's plans from the governor's own Natural Resources Agency are critically deficient and won't do it. But PG&E and the PUC aren't going to let a little thing like facts stand in their way of raising rates again.
Because the CPUC is not going to reject their request just because of what you just read. And this again goes to the problem of regulation. And and again, when people die, when people's homes are burned down, the Press Democrat just had an article regarding the fire victim trust selling its remaining shares of PG&E stock. There's people that are waiting for money because of the lawsuits and everything that have come, from PG&E caused wildfires. Can you explain to us how us, the ratepayers, are impacted by PG&E paying out for wildfire victims?
This might be perhaps one of the most egregious things that PG&E has ever done. And you have to say the bar is pretty high on that standard, which is they used wildfire victims pre-2019. They got the governor to change the law in ways that are just extraordinarily pro-PG&E in 2019. And some of these cost increases are essentially those chickens coming home to roost. But pre-2019 wildfire victims, so we're talking the Camp Fire, and I think the Tubbs Fire, and the Coffee Park Fire, right? Some horrible fires. They used those people essentially as human shields to get the law changed in 2019. They told the wildfire victims they would not get compensation unless the law changed. So the wildfire victims flooded Sacramento begging people to change the law so that they would get paid. And then incredibly cynically, PG&E filed for bankruptcy, and as part of the bankruptcy settlement, they screwed over those same wildfire victims. So this wildfire victim trust was funded at a level that would never pay the wildfire victims in full. If anything, estimates at the time, and my estimates were that the wildfire victims were going to get 20 to 30 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
Well, I was too optimistic, because what happened was PG&E appointed a trustee. So this bucket of money was $13.5 billion to pay the pre-2019 wildfire victims, because they were clearly, PG&E was clearly negligent and clearly was going to owe them damages. And so some shareholder money, remember, we pay the shareholders, and the PUC allowed PG&E to keep a bunch of unauthorized profits. So the shareholders basically just took from the overflowing bucket and put some of that money into the Wildfire Victims Trust. And then the ratepayers also put more than half the money into the Wildfire Victims Trust. So $13.5 billion were supposed to go to the wildfire victims. The problem is the trustee, within 3 years, spent over $1 billion of that on administrative expenses.
Of course.
So now we have less than $13.5 billion. So it's not going to be 30 cents on the dollar, because the trustee basically wasted a bunch of money on his cronies, hired all sorts of people to assess the wildfire victims' claims rather than just pay them. And so that's one of the big reasons why most wildfire victims, or at least a substantial group of them, haven't been paid yet. It's egregious how PG&E structured that deal, how they screwed over the wildfire victims, and how they used them to get statutory changes that PG&E will be laughing all the way to the bank for at least another decade. We have got to change the law back to hold PG&E accountable, because that law basically said post 2019, unless PG&E was willfully negligent, which many had interpreted to mean criminally responsible, then automatically the ratepayers are going to pay for all the damages. So PG&E held up the damages for people that they were actually liable to until they could get the law changed to say, hey, the ratepayers' pockets are open for our negligence. And then very crassly, what's been happening is PG&E's been settling out these indictments that the Butte County and the Shasta County DAs have been going after PG&E for post-2019 wildfires, for civil penalties. So the DA dismisses the criminal case, thereby putting the ratepayer on the hook. And then PG&E says, hey, we'll give you a bunch of money as long as we don't have to admit liability, and it's only a civil fine, so that they get themselves under this. The ratepayer pays no matter what new law that the governor promoted and pushed through. And so that's another reason why our rates are going up, because PG&E has no motivation or incentive not to continue to be negligent, because we're on the hook for their negligence. As long as they can convince DAs to stop, to not go to criminal trial, so that they don't get criminally convicted again. Now, as you know, they have over 100 criminal felonies that they've either pled to or been convicted of. But that was pre-2019 when they got the law changed. So as long as they're only civilly negligent, you and I pay for their negligence.
I mean, this is kind of silly, but I just keep thinking it when you talk about these decisions. Is there nobody with a soul on PG&E or CPUC? And I really don't mean that as a joke. It's just, is there nobody there that really wants to do right by us, the ratepayers? Are they just all dirty?
Well, I think it's more co-opted. I'll say that. Maybe some people are in fact dirty, but I think it's more co-opted. You go into the system, and I can tell you this is what happened to me. And the staff and the lobbyists tell you, you can do A or you can do B, but you have to pay us. And it was only because I had a legal training and I just rejected somebody telling me I could only do 1 or 2 and that we were going to pay through the nose regardless, that I really dug in and had my staff dig into what was our authority. And the auditor is right. The PUC has broad authority to reject this bullshit, but they just don't do it because there's this relentless pressure to go along and do what the utilities say. And it's not just from the utilities and their lobbyists. It can also be from your appointing authority, which is the governor and the governor's office. And so eventually I broke with my appointing authority, Governor Gray Davis, and said, look, I got to protect the ratepayers. That's my job. When the governor was basically telling me, make a deal, make a deal, make a deal. And so if you want a political future, then it's a whole lot easier to have a political future if you go along and get along. And just look at where some of the former commissioners have ended up.
Right.
You've probably seen the commercials with Carla Peterman. She was a commissioner who I would just say was incredibly generous to the utilities when she was on the commission. And then she got $1 million deal with Southern California Edison and more than $1 million deal now with PG&E. So she's sitting pretty, as are several other commissioners who have gone into the companies that they regulated.
Right.
And so we need to not tighten up. We need to actually enforce and make stronger those ethical walls that don't allow that revolving door. Because you've got all this pressure to go along and get along, political pressure, staff pressure, lobbyist pressure, and you don't have a lot of resources at the commission unless you seek them out to figure out another way. And then you've got money right over here. Hey,
Yeah, I'll pay you.
hey, when you're done with your PUC job, do I have a job for you, baby?
Ugh,
And then
dirty.
we also have the folks who come from the utilities, like Commissioner Reynolds, who came from Cruise and has been a leader in making sure the PUC rubber stamped Cruise's applications until finally the DMV stepped in because Cruise was unsafe.
Yeah.
And the DMV revoked their authorization to drive in California. It wasn't the PUC. The PUC didn't act until they were already, until their authorization to drive was revoked. It's
God forbid
extraordinary,
they should do the right thing.
right? And so in that sense, it is a system that is designed to cater to and do the will of the utilities. And perhaps what we need to do is just end that system. Because if anything, the purported regulators are lapdogs for the utilities rather than watchdogs. And we might as well just call it factually what it is. I would rather have just actually no regulation and throw those utilities out to court suits, lawsuits, than this purported system of regulation, which isn't regulation. And then what happens is the courts then defer to the agency. There was just a big Supreme Court case that was decided just a month ago that said, hey, if the agency is regulating in that sphere, you can't short circuit the agency's regulatory process and take the utility to court. And what it was a bunch of wildfire victims, lawyers, went to the court and said, hey, the PUC isn't doing this. So we want to bring this case to you, court, and show you how PG&E's negligence caused our damages. And this was actually, it was not wildfire victims, it was power safety shutoff victims, right? So people who had losses because of all these power shutoffs. And the court said, no, the PUC is looking at that. So as long as they're looking at that, they're the regulatory agency. You got to take your claim to them.
It's ridiculous.
And so now what's happened is the PUC's lack of regulation, but their suggestion that they might regulate, is preventing actual plaintiffs with actual damages from being made whole by courts.
That's crazy. I feel like I never want to leave our conversations feeling as helpless as I often feel while we're having these conversations, if that makes sense. Because the last time we were on, or the time before that, it was Write Your Governor about the trailer bills. And so many people said that they wrote it, and I put it in the thing. And it always seems like we try, and then it's just the same old, same old. So Loretta, people are listening. They're probably pissed off, they often are after our conversations.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do? What do we do now? What do we put our focus on? I know we talked about the governor's race coming up 2025, 26. What about before then? I mean, what about caps on increases? Is there anything more immediate than waiting a few years or 10 years?
Well, so the problem with caps on increases is it has to go to the legislature. So it all comes back to our elected officials. So one, tell your elected official right now, do not approve the PUC's budget until they can show you, elected official, that they are going to be serious about cutting PG&E's costs. Because there's a lot to cut. The auditor itself says so, as does the Natural Resources Agency. Why don't we just look at the actual reports that are out there and do that?
Mm-hmm.
So that's an easy ask, because there are two reports that have come out in the last, in the summer, that say do A and do B, and the PUC is not doing it.
Right.
So make them do that before they get a budget. Why should they get paid to not regulate? Right. So number one. And number two, make sure, well, actually, we do need to change the law. We need to allow people to go to court freely, regardless of what the PUC is doing. And that might shape the PUC up. So we need two different laws changed. One, there shouldn't be there shouldn't be a statute that says the PUC has primary jurisdiction over all these issues when they're not doing their job. Take that one statute away and people can go to court. And then two, the PUC has special rules for taking their decision to court. And those special rules only apply to the PUC, unlike every other administrative agency in California, and frankly, every other administrative agency across the country. The PUC has special procedural rules, and you don't have a right to go to court after they've made a stupid decision. It's called a discretionary writ to the appellate court, instead of an absolute right of appeal to the trial court, like all other administrative agencies. So change that rule. Make the PUC follow the rules that every other administrative agency follows. And then all of a sudden, we'll at least get some court review of their terrible regulatory decisions, because they're anti-regulatory. They just give it up to PG&E. And so if we took off the handcuffs of plaintiffs who have damages because of utility negligence going to court and getting court review of those damages, and we took off the limitations on questioning the PUC's bad decisions, then we would actually get some judicial review just like that. And that's not, I think, an anti-utility standpoint. It is a pro access to the court standpoint.
Yeah. And I think that, forcing the elected officials to do those sorts of things and changing those statutes, the laws that you were talking about are important. What about help for people? I know you were talking about how much more low-income people are paying to PG&E.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea of, I mean, I would just assume that there's fewer people being helped in that way. I've even thought, just go through the process of trying to get help with your bill and paying your bill. Is it effective to try at least to go through the process, and are people getting helped in that way?
Well, there were some federal monies from the pandemic that helped people with their back utility bills, but that money's, I think, pretty much dried up, or it will have dried up by next month. And then, but even so, because the bills are going up so much, there is a record rate of people who are behind in their utility bills in California, a record rate. And it's higher than other states' rates of falling behind in your utility bills. So that shows us it's not just pandemic related. It's because these rate increases are just unsustainable, and people can't pay them. Who has an extra $500 to $1,000 a year?
No.
So you know what the PUC's answer to that is? Make people's electric bill depend on their income.
Yeah, and
so right at this moment, the PUC is designing rules that will peg your electric bill to your income, which I think is so outrageous. It's hard to describe how outrageous that is, but I do think that that's going to get working people up in arms, because that's going to increase people's electric bills even more for no reason. It's not like you're going to get more or better or cleaner or safer electricity. You're just going to pay more because you make more. And then, of course, you've got all those privacy problems, because who's going to verify how much you make?
Yeah.
The PUC, PG&E? I don't think so.
And I know we talk about the loss of life from wildfires, but I'm also wondering how many people are going to lose their lives because they don't turn on their heat, or they don't turn on their AC because they just can't afford it. People are literally I'm sitting in a 65-degree house, which I'm used to now. I'd like it to be a little bit warmer, but some people don't even turn their heat on, and yet they're still paying astronomical rates. They're paying so much and not even getting the service or the electricity that they need to survive. And I can imagine that if this continues, that people just won't turn it on. And unfortunately, some people might get sick and might pass away because of the conditions that they're forced to live in.
And that's been documented in the past. We know that in the 1990s, when other states changed their electric rates in crazy ways, more seniors died in the summer because they did not use air conditioning because they couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I live in San Francisco, and in that way, I'm lucky because it's just not that hot. But what about people who live in Livermore or
Yeah.
Stockton? I mean, air conditioning is a public health issue. And so what PG&E says is, oh, we get it. So why don't you ratepayers pay us to have cooling centers, right? We'll take over like unused malls and unused office space where people can come and hang out in air conditioning because we understand they can't afford air conditioning themselves given our crazy rates. So pay us to create cooling centers for people who can't afford their own air conditioning where they can come sit and maybe use a computer or our electricity on hot days.
Yeah.
So that's their fix. Don't fix the rates, just pay us more to have kind of group centers where people can not die.
Right. Which is so easy for senior citizens and the disabled and everyone to get. And overnight when it's also hot, it's just,
Yeah.
it's not a true answer. And it's so frustrating. But I love having you on because at least I'm talking to somebody that understands what's going on so they can explain it to the rest of us. Loretta Lynch, thank you so much for taking so much time and talking with us. We'll have you back in the new year because none of this, unfortunately, is being solved. And we have to keep the screws on these people, including our elected officials, including the governor, or we're just going to continue to get screwed by PG&E and the CPUC year after year after year. And so, Loretta, thank you so much. I always appreciate you coming on. Have a Merry Christmas. Have a happy holidays. If anybody has a question for Loretta, send it to me, thenikkimadoroshow@gmail.com, and we'll ask it next time because everyone always loves your expertise on this issue. So thank you so much.
Well, Nikki, thank you very much for shining a light on all this PG&E egregiousness and the PUC's egregiousness. And my only concern is that your listeners go to Patreon and support you, because otherwise you're not going to be able to afford to shine that light because the light's too expensive.
Exactly. I need to keep the lights on, people. So please sign up to be an official Medorable. Loretta Lynch, thank you so much. Have a happy new year, and we'll talk in 2024. Thank you.
You too. Thank you so much, Nikki.
Bye.
All right. So Loretta Lynch, what a great interview with Nikki and Loretta. Thank you for being here on the Nikki Medoro Show. I'm Kim McAllister. Can you hear me? Am I muted? Is everything good? Excellent. Well, I thought I would do a second hour because I have a former coworker and friend who has a really, really interesting story. If you've ever dated someone that you wish you hadn't dated. Well, other people probably dated that person too, right? And so what happens when those people that had that shared experience get together and compare notes and maybe support each other? We'll talk to Lara Star about that coming up. But first, let's do a little bit of news here on the Nikki Medoro Show and get you caught up about all the things that are going on in the world. See if I can play my music. Here you go.
Now,
that's right.
From around the world to up your street, the Nikki Medoro Show presents News Czar Kim McAllister.
Well, we will start with the funeral for former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor underway. O'Connor was honored yesterday at the Supreme Court ahead of a service at the Washington National Cathedral this morning. She became the first woman to sit on the bench on the High Court after being appointed by Ronald Reagan in 1981. Crews are working across New England as hundreds of thousands of customers remain without power. The region was battered with high winds and a deluge of rain last night, knocking down trees and power lines, killing at least 4 people there. 2 people were killed by falling trees in Massachusetts and in Maine. The Transportation Security Administration expects airports to be very busy in the next couple of weeks for the holidays. TSA predicting a 6% increase in travel at airports nationwide compared to last year on the 3 busiest travel days of the holiday season. The agency predicts that will be Thursday and Friday of this week and New Year's Day. Lawyers for Dwayne Keefe D. Davis are asking a Las Vegas judge to release him from jail while he awaits trial for the murder of Tupac Shakur. A motion was filed to allow Davis to leave on his own recognizance or a set of reasonable bail conditions that would be less than $100,000. Davis's lawyer says his health is suffering due to his time at the Clark County Detention Center. New York State is now looking into potential slavery reparations. Governor Kathy Hochul signing a bill today ordering the creation of a 9-member commission to study the state's history on slavery. The bill states that the commission will look into the appropriate remedies and reparations and potential policy and legislative solutions for the damages done to people and to communities as well. So New York becomes the next to get in line and form one of these reparation panels. That doesn't necessarily mean that reparations are coming as we see here in California, but the study will be underway. Celine Dion's sister is saying that the singer no longer has control of her muscles. Claudette Dion providing the health update during an interview with a French publication. Celine Dion revealed last December that she has been diagnosed with Morsch-Woltman syndrome, also known as stiff person syndrome, where you do lose control of your muscles. She was forced to cancel tour dates that she had planned for this year. Her sister said the hope is that Celine can one day return to the stage. I'm Kim McAllister, and this is the Nikki Medoro Show. This report is crowdfunded and sponsored by you, so please do find us at thenikkimedoroshow.com. There it is, thenikkimedoroshow.com. That's where the Patreon and the PayPal links located, and all the good stuff, including Nikki's list of favorite things. I've purchased some things off the list myself. There's some good stuff on there, so check it out if you're looking for still last-minute holiday gifts and such. I do want to thank Doug jumping in at the second hour, the live hour of the show, with a $5 super sticker. Thank you so much, Doug, for supporting the show. Really means a lot to us, Nikki and I. Nikki, by the way, I should mention, is at her second job in San Francisco today, because got to bring in that money, honey. I'll tell you. All right, let's get to my friend. Oh, and before I do that, I should ask you to click the thumbs up button, because that's free. So click like and subscribe, as they say. We appreciate that too. All right, let's talk about relationships, and let's talk about what happens when they go wrong, but you find support in the most unlikely of places. My next guest, a friend and former coworker at KGO Radio, has a blog. And I don't know if you call it a blog or a newsletter. I'll ask her about that. But I'm deep into reading about this story. And it's interesting because it's a peek into somebody else's business, for sure, but also along the way, now that she's gone through it, I find myself yelling, red flag, no, back away. But it's interesting to me that she found support from this person that she was dating, their previous relationship partners. So without further ado, let me bring on my friend, former KGO producer, Lara Starr, to the show. Hi.
Hi, good morning, Kim. So good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well. How's it going? Happy holidays.
Thank you. It's going great. Happy holidays to you too.
Good. Thank you. So is it a blog, or what are we calling this?
What are we calling this? So Substack is the platform, and Substack is sort of a blog meets MailChimp, if you can picture that. So it has the platform allows you to create a mailing list for an email newsletter that goes out to all of your subscribers, sort of the way people use MailChimp for their businesses. But then those posts sort of live on a page like a blog. So it combines those two. And what I love about it is not ad supported. So you know how like blogs get all junky with the ads and they don't load and there's all this random stuff. There's none of that. It is very elegant. So they make their money, much like you and Nikki do, through subscribers and patrons. So it allows creators to create content and offer different subscription levels. Although mine right now is completely 100% free. So if anybody is intrigued by the story we're about to tell, you can absolutely go to larastar.substack.com and read more.
So let's start where I kind of left off in the live version of your life, which is when we worked together at KGO, you were married to a lovely man.
Yes.
And your son hadn't yet moved out of the house, but then you have this horrible thing happen and your husband passes on.
He does. In January 2016, My husband, who I had been with since I was 18 years old, we were together for 28 years, married for 18 of them, died suddenly of a heart attack at age 50.
Mm.
I was 46 and our son was 16. And as you can imagine, it was tragic. It was sudden. It was unexpected.
Yeah.
I was across the country at the time. My son came home and found him. So it was
Oh, God.
dramatic also.
Yeah.
And that was the kickoff to 2016. And we all know how well that year went for everybody.
Mhm.
It was particularly bad for me. But I learned so much from that. And I'm not one of those everything happens for a reason people, but I absolutely believe there are gifts to be found in almost everything that happens. There are some tragedies for which there are no gifts, but this is not one of them.
Yeah.
And one of the gifts I got from that, the most important one, was to ask for help. And what turned that for me was I recognized how absolutely generous it is to invite people to accept what others have to give and to give them an opportunity to give those gifts and to accept them. And I know that's really hard for people. We all will help other people, but we won't ask for help ourselves. And how damn arrogant is that? Like, sure, I'll help you. You little person needs help. I'll help you, but don't help me. I don't need help. No. So the number one. And number two is number two is I learned how important community and connection and friendship were. People showed up from out of the blue. I got $30 candles from Anthropology from somebody I worked with 30 years ago.
Wow, that's nice.
And Kim and I know each other from KGO. I was the producer of the Michael Finney show for many years, for those of you who remember that show. And we had a regular guest on the show who, when he found out about my husband, donated to a GoFundMe we set up to buy my son a car, far out of proportion to our relationship. It was a very generous donation. And what I learned from that was I assumed he was paying forward a great kindness that was paid to him. So the idea that you can pay forward kindnesses, that the connections you have with people, you don't know how they land, was one of the lessons. And the third was I was relatively public about sharing my grief and transition and process on Facebook, my previous medium of choice before Substack. And I was inspired to do that by a friend of mine who very, very tragically lost her 2-year-old son to cancer and was also quite public about that process and transition, or at least as public as she was, as she wanted to let us know. And I found that so brave and so inspiring and ultimately so healing. And all of those lessons are directly tied into the story we're about to tell.
And so I when you say at the very beginning of this that you had dated your husband from the age of 18, right?
That's right.
And you're married for how many years?
4,000.
Right.
I was 18.
Long time.
Yeah, I was 18 when we met and 46 when he.
So you're 46 when he passes away. And I'm thinking immediately, she hasn't dated in a long time. She might be, maybe, her radar's off for, because a lot of women think, we see the red flags coming marching down the street, right?
Right.
So I'm thinking, well, maybe she just hasn't been here in a while. Like maybe, when you think when I'll let you go ahead. I'll let you move on to the story. I don't want to ruin anything because I was going to give it away, but I don't.
No. You are absolutely right. I was a total babe in the woods when it came to dating, and in so many ways, like I said, just I hadn't done it, in my adult life at all, but I went into it naively thinking like, I looked great. I lost a lot of weight in my 40s. I felt confident. And there was a part of me that was super excited to start dating. I'm like, I haven't been a girlfriend in a very long time. I've been a wife and a mother for a very long time. Like, I'm ready to go out to dinner and meet new people. And I thought, I'm awesome. All my friends are awesome. I bet there's all kinds of awesome men to meet. And so I went into it very, very naively hopeful. And fairly confident in my spidey sense, which
Yeah.
we will learn was not as calibrated as I thought it was.
So you go on a dating site
Yes,
and you meet this fellow.
I sure did. So he was only the second date I went on when I decided to go on Match. And let me just backtrack a little bit. So I decided to go on Match. And like the little Hermione Granger I am, I prepared. I thought about my profile, what I was going to write. I wrote it out in Word so that it would be proofed. I chose really cute pictures. They were all current, that showed my personality and my style. And I paid because I wanted to telegraph, I'm taking this seriously. And so I did all that. I go on Match.
Mhm.
And within 5 minutes, probably less, I've joked it was like a graduate level course in gender studies in 5
Wow.
minutes. Literally 99.9% of the men on the app did not make that effort. And it's funny. And believe me, it's funny because I have made a sort of side hustle out of laughing about men's profiles on the dating apps. But it is also super not funny because it just shows all of the effort me and so many women put in and how little effort so many men do. And then they blame it on the apps. They blame it on women. Why can't I meet anybody on here?
Yep.
Maybe because you're in a matte bathroom mirror selfie with an open toilet behind you and everything in your profile is misspelled and you're not looking for drama. Yeah, no, not a lot of women signing up for that.
No.
Anyway, so and the first date I went on, I came home that night and told my son it was a bust. He didn't make me laugh once.
No.
And my son said, "That's not that hard to do." And I laughed and he goes, "Right?"
Yeah.
So the second date I went on was with Chris and we clicked right away. It was like we laughed. We were into the same music. We were into the same movies. I found him super attractive. He was super interested in me. And I thought I found a needle in a haystack. And I also was like, I mean, we've all met people who give us creepy vibes. We
Right.
all have met people who give us, you're just blowing sunshine up my skirt vibes. We have all met those people and we, politely walk away from them at the party, whatever. I wasn't getting those vibes. And it just felt like, so the other thing I developed when I started dating is what I call the Netflix test.
Mhm.
And that is, would I rather spend more time with you or would I rather watch Netflix? And it shouldn't be that high a bar, but you'd be surprised how few men can meet it. And I will say, even after everything Chris and I went through, or I went through with him, he passed the Netflix test every single time for the better part of 5 years. He never wasn't fun. He never wasn't interesting. We never didn't have a good time. We never didn't have like witty banter backing back and forth. Like, I mean, except the times when he was like stumbling down the hallway drunk in Barcelona, but that's another story. But other than that, he had the charm, he had the wit, he had the cultural references that are my currency, and he flipped my switch.
But so you date him for 5 years, but very early in the relationship, you get a note.
Yeah. So I don't know if the flag could be any redder than this. So we met in February of 2017. And in April of 2017, I'm sitting at work, lunchtime, I think, minding my own business, looking at my email. And I get a message from a friend, so like a couple tier, not a close friend, a couple tier out friend saying, Lara, this is really weird, but I have a friend who wants to get in touch with you because a friend of hers has something she wants you to know about the man you're dating. And I said, okay, that's weird. What Lifetime movie am I in now? But yes, I want to know what she has to say. A, because I want to make sure that I'm not dating a psycho killer. And B, I am a unabashed drama goblin. Like I don't seek it out and I don't create it, but when it is handed to me on a plate, I will eat it.
Mhm.
So I said, yes, please get a hold of me. And I got an email, anonymous, from an account that, wasn't identifiable as a person, letting me know the person I'm dating is has a history of being violent and abusive to women, especially his ex-wife, is an alcoholic,
Mhm.
has many DUIs in his past, and there was reason to believe he wanted to move in with me so that he didn't have to, secure his own housing.
So he was fixing to take advantage of you, is what they said.
Basically, yeah.
Mhm.
And I'm sitting there at work reading this, like, again, now I've gone beyond Lifetime movie. Now I'm in like a, I don't know, podcast or something. Like, what is this? I'm a normal person with a normal life and thought I was dating a fun, normal guy. And I didn't know what to make of this. And he had told me versions of some of that. Like, I knew he had a past as like promoting raves and selling ecstasy in Seattle. So he told me about some of his history and his past. And, he had been, arrested and in a bar fight in Mexico or something. And to me, this sort of mom from Marin, it was like, that's exciting. Tell me about jail. Like,
Mhm.
that is where I was at with it. Like, he had lived this very different life than I had. He
Mhm.
seemed to be like, all right, he's pushing 50 now. He's got a steady job and he's wanting to move on. And, that was all in the past. And that is how he presented and told it. Like, this is my wild past. It's made for a lot of good stories, but,
Mhm.
this is where we are now. I made the mistake of forwarding the email to him and saying, what the hell is this? Which gave him a roadmap for what not to do going forward, right? And he had an answer for everything that seemed plausible to me because I'll probably be unpacking why that was why he was
Mhm.
able to do that for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
But he said, I was not abusive. I'm still in touch with my ex-wife. We probably talked 6 months ago. I've had DUIs. It has been, 5 or 7 years. I don't remember, since I had one. Why would I want to move into your place? I have a place. And I said, if you think, if you're looking to, take advantage of a rich widow, you are barking up the wrong tree. Like, I don't have any money. I don't own my house. Like,
Mhm.
there's, move on if that's your game. And he didn't. And we went on to have, again, we were in each other's lives and had on again, off again romantic relationship for 5 years. And nothing on that list ever materialized in our relationship, ever. He never asked me for money, ever. He was never, ever physically abusive at all, or even threatening. Like, I never, ever, ever once either was or felt unsafe. And the other stuff, like, I knew about I knew as much about his past as he had told me in terms of
Mhm.
the DUIs and things like that. And the only thing from that list that presented itself in our relationship going forward was the alcoholism. And that took many, many months before I saw that.
So when does it start to go wrong and what happens?
The first time when it first started to go wrong was at the end of that year in sort of late 2017, early 2018. We took a trip to Barcelona and Lisbon. And on the one hand, it was magical. We traveled well together. We never bickered. He made dinner reservations. He bought theater tickets. He chose fabulous hotels. And he even said to me at one point, I hope I'm not being controlling by planning all this stuff. And I'm like, hell no. I have been the
Mhm.
mom for 17
Yeah.
years. I've planned everything. Tell me where to be and I will be there happily.
Yeah.
And I can't, I mean, you're a mom, you can't even imagine what it felt like to have
Yeah.
somebody taking care of those kinds of things. But again, it didn't feel controlling. And he said, well, why don't you do our time in Lisbon? So I handled Lisbon. It was a fantastic trip. And until the first night there, we went out and we had an amazing time. We went to play a bar he found, and we found a Christmas light up parade for the Feast of the Epiphany, and listened to live music. But we came home and he was so drunk, he literally got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And instead of going to the bathroom, went into the hallway and is like stumbling down the hallway in his underwear, drunk, because he turned left instead of right.
Mm.
And then I let him back in. He used the bathroom. He goes back to bed, and he left the light on in the bathroom. And I said, could you at least please turn the light off? And he's like, no, you do it. So he was that kind of drunk. Like, again, never abusive, never physically or verbally abusive ever, but just obnoxious. And I can't even tell you how triggering this was. Here I am halfway across the world with somebody I was really excited to be traveling with, really excited about where our relationship was going. It was also my husband's, his yahrzeit is early January. So there was that layer to it as well of, the second year after John died, being in another country with another man. And I didn't sleep at all that night. And he was very apologetic the next day. How can I make this up to you? Don't let it happen again. And then it happened again 2 days later. And after that, the boundary I set and the line in the sand I drew was I wasn't going to not date him, but I would not live with him. I would not marry him. And I, wasn't going to take a major trip with him again until he addressed this. And I had no idea, maybe I was the first, maybe everybody else he dated was an alcoholic too. And they just put up with this because this is how they drink, or maybe nobody had really challenged him on it, or who knows. And so in the tradition of women everywhere, I absolutely did not want to take on changing him. It was not my project I wasn't going to do that. But I did have hope, faith that he would want to change for himself because of who he wanted to be. And that a bonus of that would be a relationship with me.
But that didn't happen because I guess you found out along the way that you were not the only lady in his life.
No. So let's fast forward to May of this year, May 2023. And I'm at the Goth Fest in Vallejo, which is not where I expected my life to change. And, look at me, I'm not a goth, but I was kind of gothy in high school, and I was temporarily living in the East Bay at the time. And I thought, oh, that'll be fun. I'll go check out the Goth Fest in Vallejo. And I was there sitting with my friend April, who just happens to be another mutual friend of ours, Kim.
Yeah.
April and I were having a chat at a cafe and an outdoor table. And I see a woman walk into the cafe, and I'm like, that's Susan. That's Susan. And Susan was the woman Chris lived with, the immediate past girlfriend to me. He lived with her from 2014 to 2016, and then moved out of her house the summer before we met in early 2017. So it had been about 6 or 8 months since he had split from her. But, and again, not having a lot of dating experience, that relationship sort of loomed large in ours. I mean, I think the immediate past ex probably does in most relationships. And so I heard a lot about Susan. I heard a lot of his versions of the Susan stories. And yeah, I had done my Facebook snooping about who she was and what she looked like, and, those kinds of things. And I knew she lived in Vallejo because I knew they lived there together. So it wasn't totally random that she would be at this cafe. So again, like the drama goblin I am, I got up, opened the door to the cafe, and it was like a movie. Like I opened the door and she comes walking right towards me. And I said, Susan? She said, "Mm." I go, "Are you Susan?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "I'm Lara Starr. I dated Chris after you did." And she sort of looked at me and I said, "Don't worry, we're not together anymore.
Mhm.
Um, but if you're amenable, I would like to talk to you about him." And the first thing she says is she sort of reaches out and touches my shoulder and says, "I'm so glad you're okay."
Oh, wow.
I was like, what the F does she mean by that? Right.
Mhm.
So again, it was in this cafe, totally random. I totally, ambushed her, but she was incredibly lovely, incredibly supportive. And she said she absolutely would talk to me. And I gave her my number. And I told my girlfriends later when I left that meeting, I was so like, you can't even imagine the headspace I was
Yeah.
in. Like, I think also, the when you hear about these people from other people, to see them in person, it's like meeting a celebrity. It's like meeting a ghost. It's like, oh my gosh, this Susan of the stories is now a real person. So that was kind of a mind F. And I initially, so I told my friends when I described this meeting, we hugged and I felt like it was like meeting another Vietnam veteran who had been through some stuff, right? Like
Mhm.
we just had this connection that was palpable. So when we talked, my intention was to just talk about his drinking. And I wanted to know how it presented in their relationship and what, that's what I wanted to understand. What I got was we were on the phone for 3 hours and then
Wow.
met in person for another 3-hour,
Mhm.
3-hour, dinner. One of the first things she says is, "Oh, he didn't tell you he owned that house in Santa Barbara, did he?" And I'm like, "Yeah, he told me he owned the house. He bought it with his ex-wife and they sold it and they didn't make much money on it. And he gave it to her." She's like, "He never owned that house. He rented that house." And I'm
Huh.
like, "He showed me that house when we were in Santa Barbara. We drove by it."
That's so
And
weird. So you compare notes and you find out that he lies about things.
lies about
Mhm.
things,
Mhm.
big things, little things. He told me he did a semester at Cal. That never happened. Like a lot of things. And
Mhm.
it was like Alice through the looking glass. Like when you are so sure you know a story and you know the truth, like you know the back of your hand, and to
Mhm.
have that absolutely upended, I don't have adequate words for how disorienting it was. The dark part was he she had been in touch with his ex-wife and he absolutely was abusive to her. And again, I never saw that at all, at
Mhm.
all. So whatever journey he took to not be that person anymore, I will honor that. But he absolutely was abusive to his ex-wife. And Susan revealed that it was her who was responsible for sending me that email 6
Mhm.
years earlier, and that she and his ex-wife were still in touch back then, and they were sort of keeping an eye on my Facebook and sort of worried about me from afar and, hoping I was okay. And of course, they both have moved on with their lives. It wasn't like that
Yeah.
was there, but, they were low key wondering what happened to me for 6 years
So
until we met.
these are women who have a shared experience in dating the same person. They don't know you, but because of that experience, they know what you're probably going through and they're worried
Right.
about you because they've
Yes.
been there, done that, right?
Yes. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so you develop a relationship, kind of a friendship, if
Yeah.
you will,
Yes.
with not only the most previous girlfriend to you, but others as well.
Exactly. So that was in May of this year. And as Susan and I started to talk and get to know each other, I was like, and I told her, like, I heard all the stories about you from Chris, but what I could glean, like, from you on Facebook and whatever, like, I always thought you seemed kind of cool. And you are. Like, I
Yeah.
genuinely liked her. And, so that kicked off, what do I call it? Like my summer of Nancy Drew meets crazy ex-girlfriend.
Mhm.
So Susan had previously been in touch with Crystal, and Crystal had dated a friend of Chris's, Crystal and the friend broke up, but she stayed friendly with Chris, mostly long distance, mostly on Facebook. They were, you know how it is. They were like Facebook friends, and there was some mild flirtation, but nothing really happened until he invited her to Las Vegas in May 2017 while we were dating. And she's like, sure, I could use a weekend in Las Vegas, whatever, I'll go. She went, and he was, unlike me, which took him a while to reveal his drunken obnoxiousness. He, I guess because he knew there was no possibility of a relationship with her because of the distance, he just let it rip right off the bat. He was absolutely drunk, absolutely obnoxious to her the whole weekend. She had never experienced anything like that. Like, this is a grown-ass man in the casino, literally like pushing her up against a slot machine and pretending to hump her in public. This is a man who sent her down to the valet to pick up his sunglasses and then forgot he had done it and was yelling at the valet about giving his sunglasses to some lady. I mean, this is him. The housekeeper was vacuuming next door, and he went to go tell her, to keep it down, and patted her on the ass. I mean, he's lucky he didn't get kicked out.
So this woman he goes to Las Vegas with,
Crystal.
she somehow comes to your group and becomes a friend?
Yeah. So after that weekend in Vegas in 2017, she reached out to Susan and was like, Susan, I know you're not with Chris anymore, but I need to talk to somebody about this weekend. Like, what happened? Who is this guy? And Susan was happy to talk to her. And so they became friends. And then when I met Susan, Susan connected me to Crystal. And so Crystal and I connected, and we talked to, about her experience with him and mine. And so the three of us formed this little support trio to help process all of this weirdness. And those weren't the only two. I also, again, Nancy Druin, my way through the summer, I've reached out to 2 other exes. And you have to understand, Chris talks about his exes a lot about his past relationships, a lot about that. So these were all names I knew. Like, I knew the names, but I didn't know these women, and some of them go back decades. But I was able to find a couple of them and, again, have conversations. And I reached out to them in the spirit of, I think we have a shared history. I know you haven't been in touch with him for a while, but I recently learned about some lies he told me, and I'm just trying to put the pieces together. Would you be willing to talk to me? And both of them absolutely were.
And so now you have this network of exes, and you've coined a new phrase.
I have. Okay. So I started calling Susan my sister ex, sort of a play on sister wives. And I was shocked that isn't a thing. I Googled it. I, looked it up in Urban Dictionary. There is a very obscure punk band in DC called the Sister Exes. So shout out to you gals for coining that. But other than that, there is zero evidence of the term Sister X in the world that I could find. So I took it upon myself to enter it into the Urban Dictionary. So if you see it there, that's me. And it is, it's a bond that is, I asked my therapist at the time, like, is it healthy for me to have this relationship with Susan? And she said, well, I hope your friendship evolves beyond just talking about Chris.
Right.
But it's like siblings in a family. Nobody else really understands. And that is what has been so powerful and so healing and so helpful to me. And what is so brave and generous of Susan and Crystal and Monica and Tracy to show up for me. This isn't about him. He's, whatever. Like, if I wanted to ruin his life and seek revenge on him, I could get a baseball bat and go Beyonce. That's not my style. I don't care. This is about me recovering my power. This is about me telling my stories. And this is about me not keeping his secrets. And the arrogance with which he tells these lies is that he counts on his ability to be able to compartmentalize and not cross the streams. And he never thought Susan and I would meet up and compare notes.
Sure. Who would think that, right?
Who would think that?
Yeah.
And so he's able to keep this going because he's convinced of his own, he's convinced he can do it. And he did for a long time. He has reason to believe it. but and again, I articulated this with my therapist with some help. Like, what was killing me was that I was keeping his secrets without my consent. Like,
Right.
and no, I will keep a secret. If you tell me something in confidence, it is solid, it is locked. I will never betray a confidence. That's not what this is. This is him counting on me, staying silent, keeping secrets so that he could go on and find his next victim and, go on to, whatever life he wants to go on to. And I'm not doing that. I am not keeping his secret. Anne Lamott famously said, "You own your stories. Tell them. If people wanted you to speak of them warmly, they should have behaved better." And there is a lot of explicit and implicit pressure on people, and especially women, to be silent, to move
Yep.
on. And I know I tried the patience of a lot of my friends. They were like, "Enough with the Chris already, Lara. We are tired, the
Yeah.
stories and the this and then that, and get over it." And telling this story on Substack and with you and anybody who wants to listen is the single most healing thing I have done in this whole process. Not therapy, not talking to girlfriends, not journaling, not reading books. Getting the story up and out of me and not keeping those secrets is been incredibly healing for me. And that is why I'm here. And that is what I'm doing it. It's not about revenge. It's not, everyone's got X stories. That's not the story I want to tell. The
Right.
story I want to tell is about these women who came together in support and generosity and understanding. And I told Susan, she had every right to say, like, "I tried to warn you, lady, you are on
Right.
your own." Or, "I have moved on and I don't want to go back to Chris land." Absolutely would have understood that. But she is absolutely committed to sort of like doula me through this process. And I am incredibly grateful to her and Crystal and Monica and Tracy and everybody I talked to for having that generosity.
And so are you five now friends? Do you go out and have cocktails? Has the relationship progressed? This whole sister ex relationship,
Right?
has
I
it
know.
progressed
I
beyond
don't-
him so that
Yes.
you're just kind of friends now and you have this shared experience, but that's not your main focus?
100%. And,
cool.
and yeah, I joked we went from Charlie's Angels to Fox Force 5. And the other thing I want to say about this whole Sister X experience is, yes, Susan and I, because we live close together, are super friends. Like, we've gone out together. She's coming over for Christmas. We went to go see the John
wow.
Waters thing together. No, she's a girlfriend. Monica lives in LA. So we're not as in touch, but she and I just made plans to go see a big art installation I've been wanting to see in LA in a couple of weeks. Crystal lives up in Washington. So again, we're not connected, so those women and I formed a friendship that is absolutely extended beyond what, our initial mutual mistake, as I call it. Tracy, whose story I'm going to be telling in a subsequent Substack, she has moved on, and she did not have her ultimate experience with Chris was not positive, and and it was decades ago that they were together. And she was absolutely happy to talk to me. We had a really good chat, and she was not up for continuing the friendship or continuing, anything like that. And that I absolutely respect. So on the spectrum of Sister X friendships, it could be anybody who, confirms, that he was cheating, well, where were you on Valentine's Day? And it could be, and I've had several girlfriends who have had that kind of experience with their sister exes, where it is in the moment, it is validating, it is supportive, but it doesn't go beyond that. And then there are some who become good friends, like Susan and I have.
The closest thing I have to this kind of story is I was in the KGO newsroom, and somebody brought in a friend from Sacramento, and she's really nice. I thought she's funny, and was a news person there. I think a TV news person. So we got to talking, and we were friends. We kind of became acquaintances, and we friended each other on Facebook.
Yeah.
Well, an acquaintance of mine, someone I'd worked with previously in radio, saw that I was friends with her, and picked up the phone and called me and said, "Watch out. This woman is crazy. She dated my brother, and she is absolutely nuts, and listed all the things that she had done to him, like financially and like really bad. And this woman who was brought into the KGO newsroom was dating one of our fellow coworkers at the time. She said,
Wow.
please warn him. So
Wow.
there I sit with this information, like,
Right?
do I go warn him that this woman is saying he's in danger? Or, does that ruin their relationship? Will I be responsible for, a big fight, for throwing a wrench into their relationship? How
Yes.
do I know this
The
really
risk.
happened? Like all these things. In the end, I said, listen, I printed out the message from the friend, and I said, I got this weird message. Here's what she has to say. I just want you to keep your eyes open and make sure that, you're not taken advantage of, whatever. And
Mhm.
it turns out he did have a very bad experience with her.
Wow.
So, I mean, you never know, and you don't know
Yeah.
how much of your business it is to get
Right.
involved in somebody else's stuff, you know?
Right. Exactly. And that is a fine line to draw. And I joke about Drama Goblin. I'm going to send you one of
Mhm.
these. Whoops. There.
Yeah. Oh, what
That's
is
a,
that?
it's a notebook that says Drama Goblin.
Oh, cute.
That's another phrase I coined, which I just came out of my mouth one day, and I
Yeah,
looked, and that's an Urban Dictionary too because of me.
yeah,
Because there is, obviously your main draw is I want to help this person, I want to warn them, I want to spare them pain. But, most of us will admit there's some intrigue in there that's pretty exciting. Like there's some chemical reaction to knowing
mhm,
things and telling things. And some of us, I think those of us who claim they don't have that in them are lying, but some of us have it more than others. I certainly have more than my fair share. But that said,
Doug says the KGO newsroom sounds like a lot of fun. It was a
totally.
lot of fun, yes.
Oh, Peyton Place over there. So, but you also do have to prioritize yourself, and you have to prioritize your own well-being, and you have to prioritize your relationships, and you have to really interrogate your motivations.
Yeah,
And that is it's a fine line to toe. So I absolutely understand that is challenging. And I thought of
it is.
that several times in this process. And
Yeah.
again, people were like, Lara, how many more exes do you need to meet? How much more evidence do you need that this is not a good guy? But that truly, truly, truly wasn't what it was about for me. It was about,
Yeah,
I just needed as much truth as I could get to counteract the lies. And
yeah,
every time I have hit post on my Substack telling this story, he has moved further and further and further and further into the back burner. It has been absolutely healing and helpful, and is nothing anybody tells you to do. They tell you to
mhm,
do the opposite. They tell you to journal privately. They tell you to write a letter and not send it. And so, with me, with no training, I am not a doctor, nor do I play one on TV.
yeah,
I'm not into that. Like I could journal and my journal could like sit on my nightstand. That doesn't do anybody any good. Nobody can learn from what I went through if I'm keeping it all to myself. And the line between secrets and shame and is very, very faint, a very tricky one to parse out. And I am
mhm.
not ashamed of anything I've done. I'm not ashamed of telling this story, and getting it up and out has really, really, really been really, really, really been empowering for me.
Has this not only dampened your resolve to go on dates and live be excited about the new opportunities in your life, or has it kind of put a damper on all that? Are you done dating for a while? Have you been soured on it?
Funny you should say that. So the dates I have been on, other than
Mhm.
Chris, which are not that many because we were in and out, whatever, have mostly been just kind of meh, decent enough guys who just didn't pass the Netflix test.
Right.
Fine. So I don't date often. It takes a lot for me to get myself, get myself up and out of the chair. It has to really be worth it. Because, as obsessed as it may seem like I am with this story, my life is huge and full. I do all kinds of things. I have all kinds of fun. I have lots of friends. This is, it is a more public part of my life, but it is
Yeah.
certainly not all of it. And at one point I described my life to a girlfriend as bowls of Skittles. And I had my fun and friendship bowl was runneth over. I have so lucky in that regard. My work bowl was sort of half full of flavors I don't like. My home bowl had M&Ms instead of Skittles because I'm not going to get into it, but I was displaced from my house for 2 years after a tree fell on it, which was going on at this time as well. And my love and romance bowl was empty except for one green little Skittle sticking to the bottom that I just couldn't get rid of because it was all I had. And I had had love and romance in my life my entire adult life. I was not that I didn't have a default setting for single. And my girlfriend said, he's not even a Skittle. He's just Skittle dust. And I said, yes. And every time I connect with him, it's like snorting that Skittle dust. I know it's not good for me, but I get the rush. So after meeting Susan, that same friend said, can I suggest that you consider pausing dating? And I'm like, yes, you absolutely can. And it's taken me time. It's taken me getting this story up and out of me that I am legit at a place in my life where I don't feel the emptiness of that love and romance Skittle bowl. I would love for it to be full. I would love it. And I'm open to it. I'm not jaded. I'm happy for everyone who finds love and romance. I'm super into it. I go out, I talk to people, I meet people, but I don't think I'll be apping again anytime soon. I actually, and we're talking about this as a kind of opportune time. I actually did fire up Tinder for some reason and go on a date last week. And
look at you.
Yeah, that is, here's a little preview. That is actually going to be this week's Substack drop.
Well, Liz says she just signed up for your Substack. So that's very cool.
Liz. Thank you so much.
Sign up. You go to substack.com and you just search for your name, Lara Star.
That'll work. Or the URL is larastar.substack.com. And
I have it on the screen here too. And
Star
has 2 R's at the end. Okay. So there are some texts or chats that I wanted to go through because we got some good ones while you were talking, but I didn't want to interrupt you. And one of the texts that came, chats that came through is from Lori, who writes, wish someone had warned me about my last ex who made me doubt my own judgment. Even until this day, 9 years and ignored all my intuitions. Manipulative, lying liars are so damaging. And then she writes, you are so lucky you got validated so soon after this relationship. Wish I'd had that. My person lied about everything, small, big, for no reason, completely was in love, and still questioned my own judgment. And that's the thing they take away from you.
Yes.
Is your relationship with yourself and your faith in yourself.
Yes, exactly. Lori, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And if I don't know how long ago that relationship was, but if you feel like connecting with a sister ex, no matter how long ago it was, it's a risk. It is absolute risk. You may not hear, the person may not want to hear from you. I'm not saying it's not without consequence, but my experience is that it's been incredibly validating and healing. And to your point, so Chris was in another relationship at the time that I met Susan. And after our dinner, I said, I'm really struggling with what I owe B, who I call B in my Substack, the current woman in his life. I'm struggling with what I owe the sisterhood, because while I wanted to make my story available to her if she wanted to know it, I did not feel comfortable sending the kind of email that Susan had sent to me. And my life was pretty tumultuous at that point. Like I said, I had been displaced because a tree fell on my house. I was moving back in. There was challenges at work. There was challenges in my family. And as much of a drama goblin as I am, I really did not need to invite more. So I made the choice not to reach out to her. But I really, really, really struggled with it. And I had lunch with a girlfriend who was dating a new guy. And she said, if there is anyone in his past who has something I want to know, I hope she shows up, which really made me question, if I was doing the right thing. And what happened was Crystal, the woman he terrorized in Las Vegas,
Mhm.
did reach out to B, the woman he was seeing at the time, and very gently said, I'm in touch with several women, and we have reason to believe that he's not being honest with you. And we have, emails and screenshots. It's not just our talking. And if you would like to know more, we're available. And she chose not to. She did not return the phone call. And that
That's
is
the
her
way
choice.
Yep.
Yeah. And I'm absolutely honoring it. So
And someday the phone will ring or the message will come through and she'll be like, God, I wish I would have listened.
Yeah. And I talked about this with my therapist at the time too. And it's the Wizard of Oz archetype is, I think, sort of Star Wars for women, right? It is a classic hero's journey. It is a classic hero's journey that isn't often framed that way. And when Dorothy famously gets to the end of the Yellow Brick Road, Glinda says, you had the power in you all the time, but you had to learn it for yourself. And sometimes I'm like, Glinda, F you, just give me the damn slippers and send me home or whatever. But that's not the way life works. And Glinda knows it. And we know it. You have to go down that Yellow Brick Road yourself in order to truly, truly reap the benefits of the journey. So that's what I had to do. And whatever is at the end of B's journey, I hope it is wholeness, happiness, and a honest, loving, fulfilling relationship. I hope that some combination of age and wisdom and her influence on him has resulted in him showing up for her the way he didn't show up for the other women in his life. Is that likely? Probably not. But and if it's not, and she chooses to reach out, I'm here to give her all the comfort and support and sisterhood that has been given to me.
Couple more chats. Sandy writes, I've been in some relationship situations where I didn't see the red flags until it was too late. I was in that situation just last year.
Oh, Sandy, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Miss Organic says, I had people contact me twice about my kid's deadbeat dad. It was so awkward and I didn't want anything to do with it, but I had to relate some of his personality traits to them.
Yep.
Randy wonders why you kept going out with this guy. Even
that
after,
is a super fair question, Randy. And it is one that I have been asked a lot. All I can say is, and I know how this sounds, but it's like, when he wasn't drunk and obnoxious, he was super great. But it's absolutely true. And like I said, he passed the Netflix test every time for 5 years. He was my biggest fan. He never put me down. He didn't do that sort of narcissist thing where they love bomb you and neg you. I was never negged. We never didn't have fun. We never stopped laughing. I never, in spite of myself, chemistry, I never wasn't attracted to him. So I absolutely realize how stupid that sounds. But when I was in it, it felt like, and I told him at the time, you are 98% great. And I thought the 2% was the alcoholism because that is where my line was drawn. I didn't know about any of this other stuff. I didn't know he was lying to me. I didn't know he was chatting with other women behind my back. I didn't know any of that stuff. And it was, so the answer is I was willing to take the good stuff. I was not willing to go any further in our relationship, meaning living together, married, those kinds of things. And I didn't know what I didn't know.
Brian says, this does not happen to just women. Firsthand experience. It happens to men as well. It is time to move forward, he writes.
Yeah, Brian, here's what I have to say about moving forward as a widow and as a human is moving forward. It's not an A/B switch. It is not something you do and then don't do. Everything that has happened to you is always with you and in you. Everything is a spectrum. So have I moved forward? Absolutely. My life is full and fun, and I am not sitting around cranking about Chris 24/7 at all. But it is a significant part of my story, and I'm going to tell it not only to heal myself, but as you see by the chats, other people have had this experience. Other people need this experience validated, and I am incredibly grateful. And so, yes, that doesn't only happen to women in terms of people being cheated on and lied to, those kinds of things. Of course, that happens to men. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but what doesn't happen for men is men rising up to support each other in brotherhood after this happens. And that is what I'm experiencing. And that is what I'm talking about.
Well, you know this about yourself. You must. You are wonderful in a million ways, but you are also you're an amazing writer. Like
Thank you.
the story,
Thank you.
when I'm reading the Substack that you've got, and I just can't stop. It's like the best novel in the world. And you have a way of telling a story that's just pulls somebody in, and you end them on the cliffhanger. You've got to know what's coming next. So I hope that you write a screenplay, or that you do somehow further the story, because it's so interesting and so applicable to so many people.
Thank
Lara
you.
Starr, 2 R's at the end, .substack.com is where you can sign up for her Substack and read a lot more of the story than we've heard here today. So if you're interested, please check that out.
Totally. And can I say one other thing?
Yeah, please.
And a couple things. My current arc, my Sister X arc, is currently 6 episodes in, and will be maybe 2 or 3 more. I had no idea it was going to be this long when I started it. I'm just writing this weekly, and it's coming out how it's coming out. But to, I think it was Brian's point, this story will come to a conclusion. This Substack is not about Chris. The Substack is not about Sister X's. So I hope if you sign up, there's a lot of other great stuff that I intend to write about. And, if Kim is to believe, I do it well. The very first Substack I wrote was about me meeting John Hamm, sort of.
That was a great one. Loved it.
Right?
Yes.
Sort of fulfilling a 60-year dream. And, and I write about and intend to write about lots of other things too. So I hope you'll come for the Sister X's, but stay for everything else.
Absolutely. Lara Starr, thank you. Happy holidays. Happy Hanukkah. I know it's over, but I hope you have a really, really great rest of your holiday season. And I'm so grateful you came on the show today.
Oh, Kim, I'm so grateful for your support and for having me and your friendship. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Lara Starr, we'll have you back on soon.
Yay.
Bye. Bye. Okay. So Lara Starr, what a wonderful person. And I really, again, encourage you to check out her Substack. So what an interesting story and a really cool person. Thank you for being here on the Nikki Medoro Show. Coming up on the Mark Thompson Show, we'll have David K. Johnston right off the bat. A lot of politics to talk about today. We'll also talk to Professor Andy Fracknoy about space and the James Webb Telescope. A lot of interesting things to talk about with him as well. So please follow me over to the Mark Thompson Show and check it out. Please click the thumbs up button here on the Nikki Medoro Show on your way out the door, and check us out at thenikkimedoroshow.com. Thank you for being here. We will end it like we always do. Here is my boy. If I can get to him. Yeah, there he is. Little Jake.
Nikki, you're oh so awesome. You're sprout like a beautiful blossom. You're also the best. I really can't rest. You're all so awesome.
Wow. Okay.